All right, let's talk a little bit about sort of how the market's headed, why it's headed there. And I'm going to try and do an opening a little bit in the context of how CEOs see the business, how the economy is sort of behaving, and what effect that's having on CEOs as they try and lead and drive companies, and in the end, what effect it has on IT. And I'm going to try and tie it back to the cloud and this amorphous thing called cloud, why it is what it is in terms of why it's catching on and why it's driving the sort of growth rates that it is, and I'll tell you about that in a second. Okay? All right, first chart. I'm sure all of you thought Fortune 500 companies are immune to any sort of change at all. The fact is, it's just not true. So if you went back to 1955, there's hardly a Fortune 500 company left. You know, names that I'm sure you've been thinking about all the time: Studebaker, Detroit Steel Wheel, Jack Frost Sugar, American Motors, Atari, all gone. All gone. And I'm here to tell you this rate of, what's the right word, extinction is actually increasing. So if you went back just 15 years, companies BlackBerry, Borders, Compaq, Polaroid, Blockbuster, all gone. All gone. And if you went back just to 2000, and I was going to do this as a pop quiz, but I didn't, you know, you're to the point where roughly half of the Fortune 500 companies are gone. How does it happen? They get bought. They wind up in tough times, primarily because they can't grow. They get out-innovated. They get in a position where they really can't grow revenue. They get into markets that actually shift. You know, you see that in some of the front page, markets that frankly just aren't there anymore. Markets change, and we're going to talk about this second as we talk about the tech industry. So the pressure, even on these big brands that you've come to know, and imagine, think about it today, if this is any predictor that the rate of change is actually increasing, then what happens 15 years from now? By 2030, are 60% of the Fortune 500 companies gone? I would tell you it's possible. All right, next chart. This is what's happening in the economy. The economy is right now humming along at about 2% growth. I could talk to you a long time about the global economy, but I won't for the sake of it. But it's growing about 2%. So just before you get any farther, and I'll try to make it as simple as I can, 2% of 75 trillion is about a trillion five. Now, the economy in China is $11 trillion, growing at about 7%. For everybody here who's good at math, 7% of 11 trillion is almost $800 billion. So half of all the growth in the world is coming from where? China. So now, just put yourself in the seat of being a CEO. If you're not exposed to China, you're going for the other 800 billion. And I can start breaking that down for you market by market by market. So when you say the market's growing 2%, it's true, but it's not growing the same rate around the world. It depends what markets you're exposed to. And IT is a really small percentage of 75 trillion. I tell people this, and I think most people think I make this up. They make this stuff up. I just make up my own numbers and sort of explain it, and it can't be that IT is this small. And it frankly is. Now, I didn't include telecom in here or some other factors that some people do include in IT. But if you look at IT is a little over $2 trillion. So 2 trillion of 75 trillion is what, 3%? So 3% of all of GDP is IT. And it's broken up into two halves, consumer and, you know, all of what we do really is businesses, B2B. And they're about $1 trillion each. And those have changed in a way I couldn't even describe to you. I don't even tried to put a chart together to talk about the changes in the last decade. IT in a consumer world was 200 billion just, I don't know, probably a dozen years ago. A dozen years ago, it was a PC, a printer, and a modem at the house. That was consumer IT. And now it's everything we all know, sort of every day. It's been on an incredible growth rate, ranging in the area of about 25 to 30% CAGR. Now, begun to start to slow down. Growth rate that's begun to slow down. But the pace that it's grown has been incredible. And while businesses at the same time, not so much growth. Over that same time frame, about a 2 to 3% CAGR. And I'm not telling you this in the context of, let me describe it to you as a CEO of a tech company talking about the opportunity for market growth for all of us in the tech sector. But if you're a CEO, most companies of those Fortune 500 companies are not growing their IT budgets. And by the way, IT budget growth changes depending on what geography you're in. What happens to IT growth? It generally follows what? GDP growth. Where does IT growth, where is the fastest IT growth in the world? I gave you the answer about 5 minutes ago. China. So when you start looking around where IT growth is coming from, it's coming from the markets that what? Lay down the newest set of infrastructure. And in the developed world, Western Europe and the United States, IT growth in businesses is about 0 to 1%. We'll talk about that more in a second. And that becomes problematic because those companies that are now selling to consumers are selling to who? Consumers that are innovating like crazy, modernizing their personal infrastructure, modernizing their applications. The buyer is getting what? Younger, savvier, more discerning, more difficult to deal with, less brand loyal. I can go on and on and on. A bunch of them, some of them are my kids. They don't have the same sort. By the way, I don't buy into the millennial myths about how different they are from baby boomers or Gen X, but they have grown up with a different set of capabilities than those generations did. And they are much tougher customers and much more demanding employees. Next chart. Same time, this is my pitch for CEOs. I'm very empathetic to CEOs. CEOs have a tough gig. By the way, remember I told you these Fortune 500 companies are going the wrong way fast? So are CEOs. So CEOs have an average lifespan of about 18 quarters. So that's about how long they last. 18 quarters from when they get started, on average, they're gone. 40% of CEOs don't make it 18 months. What happens to most CEOs? Getting the job actually gets ahead of them as opposed to them getting ahead of the job. I actually see, and have you invited some investors here? I see some faces. So I won't ask them to call themselves up because as a group, they're a very difficult group. Not very empathetic to virtually anything, really. I mean, as a group. And I mean this affectionately, but, well, maybe not really. But it's really about, I don't really care about, your problem. I care about cash flow. I care about earnings. I care about growth. I don't care about any of your problems. I'm really not sure I care about your strategy. I only care about your strategy in the context of a way to evaluate whether I think you're going to get the core fundamentals of the business up and get your stock price up. And over a short period of time, if you can't do that, somebody else will do it for you. So simultaneously, you have two issues. I have to take share. Remember, in a GDP growth market of 1%, 2%, it's easy to grow when GDP is growing. When GDP is not growing, how do I have to grow my company? I have to get somebody else's customers, right? I can't get new customers without getting somebody else's. So I have to take share. So what do you have going on at the same time? In a 1%, 2% growth market, I'm trying to invest in two things. I'm trying to do two things at the same time. Invest to go get somebody else's customers, and I'm taking down my expenses simultaneously. And if you hear these messages from CEOs about taking cost out at the same time as they talk about growth, it may sound to most people like it's confusing, but it's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to hedge their bets. They're trying to put themselves in a position to grow the business from the traditional metrics that they have to use to please their investors simultaneous with trying to grow the top line as they do it. Now, I only know a few ways to grow revenue and to get somebody else's customers. You got to be able to have innovative products, which usually is a longer play. If you become a CEO and you say, I'm going to out-innovate my competition, and remember some CEOs go in 18 months, is that my surest way to win? Probably not, depending on product cycles. Second, I can cut prices. What happens if I cut prices? What happens to my revenue? It actually goes down, and I have to get more units. Or third, I can give better customer service and differentiate myself that way. And in most cases, CEOs will try to do all three at the same time as they're taking cost out. Next chart. I've already told you a little bit about what's on the left-hand side. Revenue growth is tough to achieve. Talked about the consumer, how much more sophisticated, how much more innovative, how less loyal they are. At the same time as you're trying to lower costs, IT is what? I mean, you all should know most of this, but 15, depending on what industry, 10 to 20% of all costs somehow revolve around IT. So when somebody says, I'm going to take cost out, is it possible for IT to be immune to that? No. Not easy. Not easy. And yet, 80%, if you spend $1 on IT, more than likely 80 cents of it is spent to do what? Just keep the place running. No innovation. Just keep the bills going out. Checks going out. Just fulfill orders. No innovation. And you have the further problem of what happens now. We have boards, another one of my favorite groups like investors, who may not know the business very well, but they know a few things. I read about hacks. And I've determined after careful analysis that that's bad. And I don't want to be on a board of a company that gets hacked. So I have an idea. Spend more money on security. So let's pretend you spend 80% of your budget on maintenance, 81, 82, whatever it may be, and then you spent money on security. What part of the budget do you think it comes from? The 82 that's the core part of keeping it running, or the 18% that's supposedly for innovation? It's the innovation piece. It goes down. And anybody who's in the banking business, when your regulator comes up and says, I'd really like to run more liquidity tests. I have a whole bunch of compliance needs that I want you, the bank, to fulfill. What part of the budget do you think that comes out of? And I only tell you that story because the pressures on IT budgets, existing IT budgets, are extreme. You have the phenomena. This is the good news part of the presentation. I'm going to try and get you more motivated in a second. But in the end, there's just a significant amount of pressure on this innovation budget. At the same time, there's not a lot of extra dollars to go spend. That's sort of the punchline while the CEO sits there trying to do the multiple things I've described, try to grow share. Okay, so that's sort of the backdrop of what we got before we get into this cloud thing. And I wanted to tell you all that because I wanted you to have context that this movement to cloud isn't just about technology. It's about business as much as anything else. It's about a business model. It's about a new way of thinking about our industry. I mean, I'll tell you as a backdrop, most of our industry, where I come from, where it's 6 in the morning, is about 22 miles of highway with companies littered around it that really sell piece parts. And the theory has been the customer will put all of this together into systems. And what's happened with that is an extreme amount of in-house IT. It's been expensive IT, putting together basically very complex multi-configurations, multiple types of configurations into very complex systems. And it's caused huge, huge amounts of spend. So cloud, which is a term, again, that's a very charismatic term. It means multiple things, and I'm going to try and define it for you. But it is I want you to think of it as a generational shift, not just in technology, but in the way we think about IT. So let's shift. So I've told you, IT, depends what research firm you talk to. You might see somebody telling you it's growing 1%, 2%. You might somebody tell you it's growing -1%. It's sort of been a 2% CAGR over the past 3 or 4 years. That's probably the best metric. I'd say probably this year it's flattish. Now the cloud companies, though, and I'm defining them as the 4 big ones in terms of dollars are Amazon, Microsoft, Oracle, Salesforce. Those 4 together get you a little bit more than, we call it $30 billion. Okay, remember the size of the market is what? Trillion? 30 billion. And then there's, if you add up all the rest of the guys that are in cloud, you probably get to 35, 36. So that's the size of the markets. $1 billion minus the 36, so call it 960, and call it 40 just for the sake of round numbers in the cloud. And yet the 40 is growing 44%, and the whole thing with the 44% growth in it is growing 0. Was that too many numbers? Everybody with me? Oracle guys? Yeah, got to double check on them. Okay, so 44% growth. And now, I have to make sure I put this in because I have it nowhere else in my presentation. Of those companies, the fastest growing would be Oracle, which is growing like 82%. Last quarter, I think we were at 89, something like that, although that included some of our acquired revenue from NetSuite. So, but I had to say that because that's growing not quite twice as fast as Amazon, but a little bit smaller than Amazon in terms of size. So, but that's sort of a context for the growth rates. You've got everything from Salesforce at 20 to Oracle at 80, the whole thing growing 44% against a 40 billion number to a 960 billion number. Next chart. Now, why is it growing so fast? Let's pretend the CIO came in and said, hey, we're going to move this stuff to the cloud. And this cloud thing will do nothing different than we're doing today. Nothing. Except our expenses will go down 30%. I just want you to imagine the CIO, remember that poor CIO that we all have empathy, a CEO that we all have empathy for, only makes it 18 quarters, a bunch of them don't make it 18 months, CIO runs in and says, same stuff, no changes, 30% less in IT. What does the CEO say? By noon. Do it by noon. Fast as you can. Just get it done. Now, that's sort of in the context financially of you see a much bigger change. You see an arbitrage of capital to operating expense. Labor costs go down. Obviously, you lose data centers, you lose servers, you lose people. I mean, a whole set of things. You no longer have to patch systems, you know, et cetera. All of that goes away. All of that goes away. Somebody else does almost all the work. But it does more. First of all, start with innovation. Faster time to market. You're not building anything. I mean, just take an example. I'll challenge you in your company. I don't know how many people you have working on your ERP system. Let's go to HR, your HR system. We have 2,000 programmers feature stringing our HR application. 2,000. And what's they do in a new release? They put features together and release them to you. Have you paid more for that? No. You didn't pay systems integrator. It came as part of your subscription fee. Faster innovation, you might get 1,000 features a year. You can take them or not. You get an innovation at a level you've never seen. No CA has ever seen that sort of innovation in the history of HR applications. Just a different business model. You get the ability, with this, you can't customize the app. So there's none of these huge monolithic releases. What you can do is extend it, though. You can take the platform, write a module that extends the application, clip it onto the application, and it doesn't change the application. You can meet customer demand faster. Everything changes from an innovation perspective. And it's done on the supplier's dollar, not yours. In addition to that, I get the question a lot of, can you tell me, can you assure me that the security of these cloud apps, I'll stick with Oracle's cloud apps, is the same as what I have in my data center? And I always respond with, I couldn't make it that bad. We can't make it that bad because of what I told you earlier, right? I mean, we have what, 67, in many companies you'll see 70% of their data, is sitting in an Oracle database. Most of our customers are 13 months behind us in patches. Can you imagine 13 months? We get attacked a lot. We see all kinds of interesting ideas, innovation, and how to attack systems, and we patch to it. And patched by the moment. 13 months ahead of our average customer. All of our security is in our cloud. And our customers, probably about 5. 10% is actually bought, about half of that's on the shelf. Fully secured, fully patched, and all the data is encrypted. We used to not be able to encrypt data. Why? It slowed down all the systems. It just made it too bulky. Couldn't get any performance. Now with the power of these systems, you can. Everything's encrypted. How many configurations do you have? I'll stop after this one, but how many configurations do you have in your company of systems? Probably couldn't even count them. How many do you think we have in our cloud? 1. Can you imagine the opportunity of what you can do when you have just one configuration, one OS, one version of the database, one standard use of a computer? That's the difference in the ability to secure, the reliability, the extensibility of what you get in the cloud. So let me go back to that first meeting with the CIO. CIO says, it just costs less. Guy goes, do it. I don't even have to tell him the rest of the story. And this is why you're going to see this become as much a CFO discussion, a CEO discussion, as you are a CIO IT discussion. Because this has the opportunity now for systems that have been ignored for years. Can you imagine flipping from the system that you've ignored for 15 years to a system that now gets this level of innovation? This is a huge change in our industry. All right, next chart. Okay. I'm just going to end on, okay. Just some things, and I did this a couple months ago, but I thought I'd try it again, of what's going to happen over the next several years. And let me go back to one other big issue in the industry, and that really gets the issue around data. Before I get to some of these predictions, one of the big real challenges in IT is the ability to leverage data. I'm going to talk about sort of this number 2 point, 2 suite providers, but it really is bigger than just a suite provider. What is the biggest issue that we all have, around most of our companies? And that's the ability to leverage information. What's the problem with trying to drive more information out of most of our systems? The lack of normalization or commonality of data. Multiple data models, disparate data models, they don't talk to each other, they can't communicate with each other. I've actually got more data coming in, I'm ingesting more data, whether it's through devices, machine learning. I mean, there's all sorts of ways and things that are driving incremental data sets. And most of those are non-normalized. So the ability now to normalize those data sets, because what's going to happen in the end is the ability to get to this panacea of a common data model, or at least a normalized data model, with microservices applications leveraging that data model, becomes what has to happen, and that opportunity goes up in the cloud. I'll explain that to you as we go. So, but a real core issue to simplifying all this is today, while I can get some simple consumer apps that I can get some level of integrated data, companies can't do it. I mean, little examples of just trying to make better decisions faster, right? I mean, I don't know if anybody here works for a cellular phone company, but it's one of my favorite tough examples. You get about 25-30% churn of customers per year, and the average phone call comes from somebody like me that leaves is about 2.5, 3 minutes. And in 2.5 minutes, somebody who's in a data center, by the way, I'm sorry, it's a call center. And by the way, the person in the call center churns at about 30 to 40% per year. Sitting at a PC, trying to get all the information about me as I'm talking to them. In many cases, maybe I'm yelling. Maybe I'm upset. Maybe you drop me on a conference call. I'm about to leave, and you don't even know who the hell I am. And how do I get all the data to this person as fast as I can? How do I get the information to a gate agent when I'm sitting there with there's one seat left and there's me and somebody else trying to get a boarding pass? Who do you give the boarding pass to? I hope it's me. But how'd you decide? Who yelled the loudest? These are all things that come with data. Better data, richer, more robust data. This is part of what's going to happen as we move forward towards the cloud. 80% of these production apps, I'm telling you, are moving off premise to the cloud. The only thing that won't be there is stuff I can't find a commercial alternative to move. Everything else is going to go. 2 suite providers alone, 80% of the market. For all I know, it'll be higher. I mean, higher than 80. I don't know if it'll be more than 2. Sort of what happens. Why do suite providers win? For exactly what I just told you. You can't have all these disparate apps and run your business. 100% of dev test will be in the cloud. All of it. Dev test, by the way, pop quiz. Remember the $1 trillion I told you? What percent of that is dev test? Nobody knows? 30. Some industries, 35. Some banks, you can wind it being 40. But think of it as a third. Everybody know how much of that's utilized? Take our place. You know, we have a lot of developers. Is Thomas here yet to talk? Oh, good. I'll talk about our development. Our development, about 20% utilized. 20% of the infrastructure utilized. And you might say, that sounds terrible. Sounds terrible. Remember, it's servers, it's databases, and all that stuff. Well, think about it first. How much of the work week are developers at work? A third? So to be utilized 20, they got to be working 70% of the time. Or working remotely. And what happens to that infrastructure during the whole time they're not working? Sits there. Sits there. Depreciates, depreciates, and depreciates. And what if you told the CFO, not the CIO, what if you told the CFO, I can give you all the same stuff on demand, and you only pay for it when you use it? What do you think the CFO says? Do it by noon. Why the hell wouldn't you do it? Well, it's complicated. You know, developers don't like to share stuff. Yeah, it won't work. Pitch won't work. And dev test has what? Low risk. Low risk, high return. 100% of dev test in the cloud. This 2025 is too late. I did it to hedge my bets. I probably won't, I don't know if I'll be here at a time frame where somebody can hold me to this, but I think it'll be sooner, certainly not later. I've told you why I think enterprise data will be stored in clouds, almost all of it. Nobody will have disk sitting in data centers holding data unless they absolutely have to. I've explained to you why enterprise clouds will be the safest place for data. 80% of IT, if this gets done. By the way, let me just go to the data centers. I tell you, the number of data centers will drop by 80%. Gone. Do you know many companies putting in new data centers? How many of you know companies that have a strategy to reduce their number of data centers? I'll bet you we're already at 70% of companies with actually a strategy written down to reduce the number of data centers. I think if this happens, 6 and 8 will happen. 80% of IT budgets will be spent on the cloud, and if that happens, you'll see a flip of CIOs now being able to spend most of their IT budget, over 50%, on innovation as opposed to maintenance. This is all about move the maintenance to somebody else. What I do being IT, is I drive innovation. I try to help the CEO gain share. I try to help the CIO get more revenue, get more customers, so hopefully they stay around more than 18 months. Well, in most cases, maybe you don't hope so. It depends who your CEO is. But in general, that would be the objective. This is going to get done. And again, you're going to hear a lot today because we like to talk to you about technology. We'll talk to you about how different and modern it is, how much more functionality is in place. What I wanted to make sure you opened up is the movement here. This is an irresistible force. This is not a what if, let's try something. This is the way things are going to go. The sooner you sort of get on board with that, I think the better. It will, for the short term, cause chaos in our industry. I'm talking about our industry, the one Oracle competes in. You know, we have some of our traditional competitors who are laying off tens and tens and tens of thousands of employees. Why? And that's basically because of the growth rate of what I described and the shift going on simultaneously. I only tell you when you think of those current providers and how many of them, I mean, you know, has everybody heard of this company, EMC? You heard of these guys? Yeah, because I didn't do this because they wouldn't give me enough time here. And they're telling me to stop here. But imagine if I'd drawn up all these companies and they were like houses. You had an Oracle house, an IBM house, et cetera. And there's an EMC house. And outside that house is a big sign, sold. Sold. And if you'd have told me, and I've been doing this a while, and if you'd have told me 3 or 4 years ago that they would just go, I mean, it's a real company. It's a real company. I mean, it's real R&D, real sales force, real customer base. Gone. Gone to Dell. And I'm not going to say anything about Dell, but it's interesting. In a smaller crowd, I'd say more. And how much premium did they get for the company? I see there's some investors here. Anybody have an opinion how much premium? Like zero. They got a coupon. You got a coupon on VMware, a sort of a tracking stock. And the price premium was virtually zero. Why? Stock, I think, was about 25 bucks. Do you remember, Ken? About 25 bucks when they sold it. And I'll tell you what, I think they had a better idea of how the stock became 15 than they did how it became 35. And it was because of this chart, or a chart like it. A chart like it. So you're going to see turmoil in our industry. Let's go to the next chart. I think we got one more. And that's why we've done what we've done. You know, negative thing for our investors. You know, when I came, our R&D was $3.7 billion, $3.8 billion. Bad news is, you know, if you're an investor now, it's $5.2 billion. And the reason is because we went on a path to rewrite virtually everything for the cloud. We couldn't stop doing what we were doing, but we had to invest, and we knew back 5 years ago we could see this coming. And that's why we started to invest at the levels we've done. Because of data sovereignty and security and a whole bunch of other reasons, we've had to work our way through 25 big corporate data centers around the world. Germany, Canada, Brazil, Australia, I can go on and on. Had to make those investments. Had to increase our sales force. We had to do all of these various things to transition our model to the cloud. We've now rewritten all of our software. Every application, every piece of database, all of our middleware to be able to prepare for what I've described. Our strategy is to be best of breed in every single app. Every app has to be the best, but it has to work within the context of a suite with standards for the very reasons I described to you before. We've entered the platform business 2-3 years ago, the infrastructure business over the last 18 months, because we believe you're going to want to have less clouds, not more clouds. I do not believe companies are going to have 30 clouds providers. I don't believe they're going to have 10. I believe they're going to get down to as few as they have to have. You're not going to want to take your mess and complexity on premise, and I got a big idea. Let me just make it just as complex. I'll just move it to the cloud. I don't think that'll happen. You get an opportunity here to simplify while you transform. And I think people will take advantage of that opportunity. Fewer application providers. That means you have to have a suite, you have to have a platform, you have to have infrastructure. I'll leave. But we did put the fastest growing cloud company. Yeah, it was very good. Very good. I don't remember. Was it? Anyway, repeated from what I said earlier. So, let me recap. Gave you a lot of data. Size of the economy, size of IT, the transformation of IT in the context of the traditional way of IT, its movement to the cloud. I've tried to describe to you, more than technically, but from a business perspective, why this is going to happen. And it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to go like this. I think what you see is it going like this. Because it's going to be exponential. It's going to be more geometric than it's going to be linear in terms of the speed that you're going to see transition. Just the example I gave you of dev test. In the context of that, I tried to explain to you also why we've done what we've done and what you hear from us the rest of the day. And to Rich's other point, I thank you all for coming. I hope you have a great day, and all the best to you.